Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from Capital One Bank and Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Cushman and Wakefield, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, New York Community Bank, Bank of America, Kilroy Metal Products, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, Briarwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Investment Fund, Essex Capital Partners, Excel Realty Advisors, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, GVA Williams, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Herrick Feinstein, LLP, Helmsley Spear, Jackson Development Group, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, John Katzimatidis, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Madison Realty Capital, Marcus and Millichap, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sterling and Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, the Moynihan Group.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller. I have no idea what's going on in the real estate market today. Each day I only hear more aggravation, more grief. Last week I hosted an event called the New York Money Summit, and all the lenders on the show said that they're really not lending. Cranes hosted something, and one of my executive producers said, Jamie Dimon says they're lending. I don't see that happening. I see office leasing not taking place. I see money not available for things. I see deals breaking up. So I brought together real estate leaders who are going to give us their perspective on what's happening in the market. My guest today includes Susie Reingold, Executive Managing Director of Cushman & Wakefield, Wendy Silverstein, who is the Executive Vice President at Vornado Realty Trust, Lori Grasso, a partner at Herrick Feinstein, and last but not least, Howard Fiddle, who is the Vice Chairman at C.B. Richard Ellis. So, Wendy, you know, your background, everybody has an interesting background. I mean, Susie was a partner at a law firm. Howard was a CPA one time, a lawyer over here. You started as a banker.
I did.
And you started in the capital markets. You've seen that. How would you look at the market today? How is the real estate market today?
I would say the real estate market today is, you know, part of the bigger problem, which is the overall capital markets, and quite frankly, they're the worst that I've ever seen them. So I think amongst all of us here, we've lived through, you know, the early 1990s, which up until now, people like to talk about 1998. 1998, I remember as a blip. That was barely anything. 2001 was clearly, you know, a bit of a turn down, but a quick recovery. 1990 was the last really bad market we've seen, and it looks like child's play compared to what we're into right now.
You know, relating to that, Susie, you and I have been around even a little longer.
A few more.
How would you relate it to the days? You said you've been in this business at least 37 years?
Yeah, 38, right?
38 years.
Close enough. It's hard to say because it's different. I think there are some things about it that are deeper. I think it's taking a long time to get a transaction finished, and tenants are not certain of their businesses, so it's slowing down the activity level. I don't think we're going to end up with more space than we've ever seen in some of the down markets. I think we're seeing a lot of space come on the market, but I don't see it as a complete dumping. I don't see a flee from New York. Those are things from the 70s, different dynamics.
You know, you bring out the subject of the flee from New York. I mean, Lori, who was at my event last week, heard Steve Witkoff say, and even Governor Patterson said it today, that if you tax the middle class or the higher earner, you're going to have a flee from New York. And this is what's happening. You know, this fleeing, people would prefer to be in Long Island or New Jersey or other places where they're not going to pay all these taxes. I don't see the flee, but I see just the market. You know, Lori, you handle developers, you handle bankers, what do you see happening? What's the crisis? Are deals breaking up? What's happening on that side?
Okay, so the biggest issue at the moment is impending maturities. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, we have a number of loans that are maturing in '09. And in the past, you could go out and you could talk to a multitude of lenders and have options. There are currently no options. So you're just completely restricted in your abilities to move forward on a transaction. So the lack of financing is killing property owners and killing developers at the moment. But going back to your fleeing comments, I'm hearing some of that conversation among friends, among colleagues, among property owners. They're seeing people talking about leaving Manhattan.
Are they talking about leaving their businesses or their personal residence?
Their personal residence.
That's different than
I agree.
fleeing the
I
office
agree.
space, which I don't see at all.
I think people aren't fleeing their office space. I think they're thinking of fleeing their residential
thinking-
to
Agree
save
with that.
taxes on the other
That's a different-
situation.
right.
But I think, you know, relating to, you know, Wendy, one of the major responsibilities of Vornado is the capital markets and lending. And last week, Mike Fascitelli, speaking at this event, basically said big is bad, and I mean big is bad because of the size of a loan. You're out in the capital markets. How hard is it to get financing today?
The answer is it's very hard. And so I think that, you know, everything that Lori said I agree with, but the issue is there are a handful of lenders at any given time who are in the market and they want to lend money. But now, for the first time, what we're seeing in really almost 10 years, because in the CMBS market, lenders became agnostic with respect to who their borrowers were, and sponsorship meant very little. So now people are really focused on first who are the good sponsors. And then, of course, after you clear being a good sponsor, they want to do middle of the road, meaning down the middle of the fairway, good loans, stable properties in good markets. And those deals, as long as they're not too big, and I think we've all decided that big, by my standard, would be maybe $100 million, and for lesser size sponsors, it could be 25 or 50.
That's correct. You have to remember,
There's
Vornado
limited-
is a
Right.
major entity.
Right.
You know, it's a different case. But now, let me relate this now to office space, because I think it's important. About a year ago, the former chairman of the board of a major investment company had retired, and he had asked my advice on some office space. He wanted something where he could have his home office, you know, his foundation, and some other space. And I remember he was looking around, his broker took him to a number of spaces, and he was looking at a property at 1350 Avenue of the Americas. And he calls me up, and he says, you know what? I've met with Harry Maclau. He's confirmed to me that he's going to do all this work in the building.
1330.
1330. He's going to do
Thank you.
everything in this building that he alleges. What do you think? And I said, look, you know, you're a big boy. You have to make the determination. Do you think he's going to be able to end up? My question comes in now. There are some weak landlords, and they're strong. I mean, hey, if it's Vornado, it's Boston Properties, if it's S.L. Green, you know, or if it's the established family, I'm not worried. But you know what? What happens if it's somebody who's weak? How is that having an effect on the tenant? Are tenants saying, is that person going to be around? Can they finish the
Yes.
work? Can they do this? What do you
They're
think?
asking the questions.
It is an issue, and there are certain tenants and certain tenants brokers, and often justifiably so, that will shy away from those that are you know, whose futures are uncertain. There are ways as a tenant and the tenant's broker and attorneys to mitigate those concerns. You may not know who your owner is, but you have rights to self-help. You get your TIs in escrow, you get your commissions paid on signing. So there are ways to protect yourself.
You can protect yourself, Howard, but I think the question is, you don't want to go into, you don't want to make a deal and you know that, oh, I have to protect, you know, you can always write all this protection, Lori, in a lease or in the other thing, but you want to know that the person's going to be there.
In this environment where
That's
where there is much more supply than there's demand, the thinking is, why go through those extra headaches and those concerns when there are ample opportunities with Vornado,
There's
Boston
no
Properties,
question.
some of the other
Wakefield is
stable
moving
owners.
to a Vornado building.
Absolutely.
We know they're there.
Right. There's
We're
no
comfortable.
question that for
You may have should have
comparable
negotiated the
for
lease now.
comparable space at a comparable
Detail.
price, there's no competition, and we see, incoming tenants. I think the other thing that happens is if for whatever reason one of the stronger landlords doesn't have the specific space need, I know somebody I was talking to rented 3,000 or 4,000 square feet in 1330, a small bank starting a branch. They said the space, they were amazed what they got for the money, because Harry Maclow does build a good building. It's built
Yes.
out, it's
Did a nice job.
beautiful. And so they got it for a fraction of the price that would be economic based on how much money was spent. But you know what? For 4,000 square feet, they're okay being there. So I think you see a little bit of both. But for big tenants making big financial commitments, they want the stability of a solid landlord.
So now I ask the big question, which I've asked to a number of people. Tell me the truth. What are rents down in the market? As I said 2 weeks ago, I did a show. I had 4 leasing people specifically, and I said, tell me the truth. If somebody is asking $100, could that person get it for $50? Is that
No.
market?
It depends.
Wait, Susie, you said something, and Howard.
I was going to say that you say, what is it down? It's being very generic. Like most markets, we really need to delve further, and even building by building, to say really where
correct.
rents are down. To look at the island of Manhattan and say where rents are down, I guess someone
can't.
statistically could give you a number. In a market I'm a leasing person as opposed to capital markets, and we're talking about markets that are in dislocation, and the leasing market is. So you have tremendous inefficiencies existing in the real estate market now. You have certain landlords that have no debt, never have debt, or very low debt, and don't believe in carrying vacant space and say, I'm going to whatever it takes. You have sub-landlords that say, whatever rent I need. And then you have others that are looking more to the value of their asset.
Let's look at a building like 1095 Avenue of the Americas. Here's a building that Equity Office couldn't sell. So it's owned by Blackstone right now.
Right.
A number of the tenants who moved in or who signed leases are not in the building.
Yep.
There's sublease space. A couple of those tenants may not even be in business, who were in that building. One of the tenants is no longer a bank. It was nationalized by Lloyds Bank. It's Bank of Scotland is now owned by Lloyds Bank. You have Centerline, who's in dread, and you have other situations over there. What happens? Those rents, you're representing tenants as the lawyer. What are you saying? When somebody says to you, what should I do, Lori? How much could I get from Susie and Howard off?
We're pushing on rents. There's a there's a serious push on rents. You were always fearful before. Should we be asking? Are we embarrassing ourselves? Are we going too far? There's none of that now. People are asking for the lowest possible rents that they can. Some of the rents that I'm hearing in the downtown office market are so low.
Yes.
And
how low?
So low.
People listen to my show. They watch. How much are rents?
What building?
What building? It really depends.
A B building in
And a
Lower
direct
Manhattan.
space or sublet
77
space.
Water Street. A lot of people talking about 77
Right.
Water Street. The Goldman Sachs has I believe net leased that building. They have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of square feet. They were never in the building. They're not in the building now. The lease goes a number of years. So they are now saying we want to unload this space. Again, have been occupied it for years. They're paying
At what
rent.
price, Howard?
So
Enough.
they apparently will do deals in the low 30s with a very full package of work and free rent. Now that was
30
a building that's
30
8 months,
gross.
30 gross,
So the net
in the low
effective will
30s.
be-
In fact, C&W is handling.
I was going to say, that's our agency. so
C&W is
I-
handling. I was told they were taking deals in the low 30s. They were asking in the 50s or near 50 8 months
And
ago.
they spent a
So-
lot of money on the building and fixing it and putting it in the right shape to rent it, but they'll rent it.
But now I'll relate to this subject to the fact that we have potentially Merrill Lynch is going to move out of the financial sector.
Yes,
There is
that's-
no question. They're not moving to the Hotel Pennsylvania, but they are going to move across.
Not yet.
Not
That's
yet.
that bullet.
So Merrill Lynch is moving out. AIG is really owned by the government. AIG doesn't need all this space. Goldman Sachs is moving to the tower. That's 2.1 million. So my estimates, there's about 11 million square feet of space available in Lower Manhattan. Some of it's A, and 50% is B. So would you say Lower Manhattan is hurt the worst in today's recessionary times?
It
Tornado
will
only has
come
one
to that. The
building that they
statistics
inherited.
aren't there yet for that in what we've seen, but it will come to that. However, remember, every time you're looking at major sublease space, it's always more difficult to rent and always more issues than the direct space. But we will definitely see there are going to be big blocks of space. I think we've seen a lot more space coming back to the market, both midtown and downtown, a lot faster than in another downturn for a different reason. In other downturns, if a major bank laid off 3,000 positions, they weren't all in one block of space. They were in different departments, different areas. So it took 6 to 12 months for an institution to restack and figure out where to put the people and create any space. Now, where you've had Lehman gone, this one gone, that one, big blocks, it's coming on very suddenly. So we're seeing this big rush. But again, a lot of those spaces have hair, as we say, and they're going to be difficult to rent as sublease spaces.
Yeah, what about, if I went back 1 year ago and did a show, and I was talking, there were still hedge funds paying $150, $175, $200 a square foot. What are hedge funds paying? I mean, as we were saying before,
What hedge funds?
What hedge funds?
there aren't that many hedge funds. I was with a hedge fund
Subleasing.
today. They said basically we're closing our doors.
Or subleasing.
Or subleasing space. So what's happening to the space that people hope to get $150 a square foot, which they were getting a year ago or 18 months ago? What's happening? What's the highest rents in New York City? I mean, you have some great buildings. I mean, 888, I remember going back many years ago, it's still a fantastic building.
Well, I mean, not all hedge funds are creating equal. 888 has TPG, Soros, some very solid, Bill Ackman's fund, Pershing Square. I mean, they're paying high rents, they're in the building, but they're not going anywhere. So I think where you had, a lot of startup shops that, spent money on space, because on a relative basis, on their 2 and 20 formula, it was not really a big expense. Those are the ones you have to worry about. And, we have a smattering, but not a lot.
So what happens to the space? Let's be realistic. You have space at 350 Park Avenue. 350 Park Avenue is a good building, but you, when it was acquired, public knowledge is that you were thinking if it was a great location, I could rip it down, it's going to be a great deal.
No, we're definitely not ripping it down.
I
It takes a lot for us to even do a lobby, so we're definitely
Yes,
not
I
raising
realize,
that.
Stephen might take their time pontificating on that. But there's the UBS space on Park Avenue.
299 Park.
Okay, 299, which has, from what I've heard, is you can get it for $60 a foot.
Less. In the 50s now.
In the 50s. So, I mean, who would think that rent on Park Avenue at a UBS type of site is going to be at that low level?
I don't think anyone would have thought that 6 and 12 months ago.
Nobody would have thought it went so fast.
We're in a new environment right now.
So what are we seeing?
Well,
I mean, you're on Park Avenue also, but you're a little further down on Park Avenue.
I think the issue is, if you want to look at something like 350 Park Avenue, we don't have any near-term roll. And so everything is just like if you are in a terrible debt market and you don't have any debt maturing, you're going to dodge that bullet for a period of time. So the question is, are rents really going to $50 on Park Avenue? And if so, for how long? I think what you see in markets, whether it's the debt market or the leasing market, is there are opportunistic buys, and if the buy happens to fit your need and you can grab it, they're going to be $50 deals. I don't think that creates the market.
So now I'm going to ask you the opportunistic question. There aren't too many opportunistic sales recently taking place of buildings.
No, because the sales are going to be forced. When they happen, they're going to be forced. In other words, I don't think you're going to see a lot of voluntary sales where people just say, oh, seems like a good time, let me try and sell. People are going to sell when the lender says either sell or I'm taking it over or selling it for you. And even that may not happen because depending upon whether or not the lenders are money good, it doesn't mean that the building's going to be run any better by a new owner. That may be the case in some instances, but I think most of the time it's simply going to be there's too much debt on a property and there's nothing anybody can do about it for a period of time.
So from a borrower's point of view, you have clients who are borrowers. What's happening with them? With maturities and loan situations, what are they doing? I mean, some of them are developers, and as I said the week before with developers, they have to develop. It's in their system to develop.
Well, the interesting thing was for a lot of our borrowers who the end of '08, it was really easy to get extensions. There was something psychological with the lenders. They just wanted to get themselves out of '08.
Yeah.
So we were able to get these free extensions, and we kept thinking, is this going to continue to happen in the first month or so of '09? And it's not. Lenders are taking a little bit more tougher stance at the beginning of '09. They're looking for the borrowers to delever. They're looking for pay downs. It's not necessarily that they're going to get it.
Yep.
But there was a switch. There was some sort of psychological switch with the lenders, at least as far as that we're seeing. On the developer side, developers need to develop. And so most of our developer clients right now, to the extent that they have existing condos, sell, close units. Every time I talk to them, how many units do you have closed? Battling rescission notices. The second a rescission notice is sent, get in counsel with your lawyer, come up with a strategy. We've been very successful and defending some of these rescission issues. And then other than that, waiting. You have to wait. It's very difficult to tell a developer to have patience and to wait. But that's what we've been preaching as of late with
So now I ask the question to really the leasing gurus: how many landlords are really coming out of denial that rents have to go down? Or are they sitting?
I don't think any of them are in denial.
I agree with Susie.
It's more a matter of not wanting to throw numbers out there. It's give me a number and I'll decide if I want to do that deal. I don't think they're in denial.
Actually, this time around, most of my world and my side is on the landlord side.
Right.
So most of my clients are the landlord rep. And in past markets, it was always, as markets were beginning to turn soft a little bit, it was our job to educate your landlords. And your landlord would often, sometimes client would get confrontational. Are you representing the tenant? You're representing me. This time around, none of that has had to happen because I think also the landlords, not only in the leasing business, but they're also in the capital markets business. And what they've seen on the capital markets business is, you said it's the worst you've ever seen. So I think the landlords understood how bad things were out there. I now put landlords in two categories: landlords that can do market deals and landlords that can't.
Right.
That's right.
That's what they can't do.
What they admit publicly is one thing, but ones that can do market deals and ones that those that can't.
What about retail? I mean, last year, Cushman put together, one of the highest leases on Fifth Avenue, $6,500. I don't think that would have happened today. I don't think Abercrombie could afford it. I mean, it was great for, for Brooks Brothers and Hickey Freeman for getting all that money. Vornado owns a third of Toys R Us. But I'm really looking at the retail in New York City. What do you see happening? I mean, also in the leasing perspective.
Well, I'll just comment in terms of the street retail that we own that, one point got very high rent. So if it was $1,000 a foot and then it subsequently went to $2,000 a foot, I'm not sure it's at either level right now. But I think, the point is if you've got long-term leases, these are flagship stores.
I'm talking right now on space that's available.
On space that's
if something's a long-term lease, it's a different market.
That's right. I think these markets are substantially off.
We've seen some of the rents come down on Madison for sure. There's more space available on Madison. Fifth Avenue still does not have an awful lot of space. I couldn't really say if the rents have come down that much, or again, it's a velocity issue. But in the street retail in New York, it will come back on a basis, again, of location. There are still retailers out there who want to be a certain place on Madison Avenue. Maybe they couldn't get it before. They won't pay as much money for it, but they will do deals. The other thing we're seeing is not necessarily bad for New York. Some of the more mom and pop operations who could not do deals in New York because of the high rents are coming back into the market now and are very active, and we're seeing an awful lot of activity. And we still have a bank client who's extremely active in looking for sites. So
what do you see representing tenants, retail tenants?
Representing retail tenants?
Tenants or landlords?
Well, on the landlord side, there were a couple of retail sites that we were looking to sell over the last 3 or 4 months. There's absolutely no market whatsoever.
Right.
You mean the retail condos?
The retail condos, yeah, that were pretty much net leased to 1 or 2 tenants. There was no market. We went out to a number of different brokers and we couldn't find any takers, and we were talking probably an 8 cap. Then in terms of financing, we've tried to do some financing of some of the retail condominiums. I recently just got a commitment, a $6 million commitment to refinance a retail condominium, which will probably be the Rebney deal of the year in terms of financing. So it's, I think there was one
gonna be a long
lender in
year
the
for
market for that.
6 million used to be 600 million, yeah.
I mean, I joke, but the commitment
That's
came
right.
in, and we did a little commitment dance in the in the office. So
Commitment means nothing, it's the closing.
I know it's retail is difficult from where I sit.
I agree with that. It's definitely more difficult than office. I mean, there are lenders out there again. So whether we have something in the market right now that's in the commitment phase, I won't
Since you're
discuss
the
it till
only
it's closed.
developer over here, where's development?
There's no development. And I was going to answer the question before. The developers who need to develop are going to be put on a very strict diet enforced by the lenders because they're not lending. There is no construction money for new construction. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the lenders
Even
really
for the
have.
even for the the 800-pound gorilla of Vornado?
Well, the 800-pound gorilla doesn't like bananas anymore. I mean, I don't know what you want to say, but we're not in the development
Right.
business because unless you have a fully leased building, I mean, quite frankly, the
would you?
cost of construction is not in line with what you could even theoretically lease a building, which I'm not sure you could do,
Right.
that it makes any sense to build. The cap rates on existing assets are a much better yield than what you could build to.
So we don't have to worry about some new potential office buildings being
No,
built.
Howard's
Absolutely
dealing
not.
with
But
the
you know,
ones
but
that
you know
are
something, the
around.
reality is, forget the environment we're in now, which it's dire. Even in the best of the markets, where the rent was being signed for $200 a foot, in the last 5 years, how many new office buildings were put up? You could count them on one hand.
Well, when you
This
start looking
market's always
back in New
supply
York over 20, 30 years,
we are supply
development's been-
constrained.
yes.
In fact, there's an interesting statistic that by 2010,
That's right.
65% of the office buildings are going to be older than 50 years.
Right.
Right,
pretty
and
staggering.
if you remember, I think it was 1999, there was this committee of maybe 21, and
yeah.
they had all planned that we need all this office space and we need all the ideas. But unfortunately, we always have crises or we have cycles. 2001 we had the Trade Center. Now we have an economic crisis. New York City will return. New York City is resilient. I'm not saying that for certain parts of New Jersey or hedge fund world of Greenwich, where these rents were at one time unrealistic number, but it's going to be a difficult time, and I'm really happy that I've had some good perspectives today. I'd like to thank Susie Reingold, Wendy
You're welcome.
Silverstein, Lori Grasso, and Howard Fiddle. See you next week.
Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from Capital One Bank and Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Cushman and Wakefield, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, New York Community Bank, Bank of America, Kilroy Metal Products, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, Briarwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Investment Fund, Essex Capital Partners, Excel Realty Advisors, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, GVA Williams, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Herrick Feinstein, LLP, Helmsley Spear, Jackson Development Group, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, John Katzimatidis, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Madison Realty Capital, Marcus and Millichap, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sterling and Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, the Moynihan Group.